Very much indeed. Welcome back to Pretoria. Let's just get some analysis and some updated predictions for you. There's really interesting stories around what happens in the areas governed by coalitions, but also you heard about half an hour ago now Ace Makashile, the Secretary General of the African National Congress, denying that there was any difference between himself and the ANC's head of elections, Fikile Mbalula, over the issue of how important President Cyril Ramaphosa has been to the ANC in this election. Well, let's get some expert analysis on this now. Angelo Fick, someone you know very well, head of the AUWAL Socio-economic Institute, and Professor Pravesh Debba is a mathematician, a statistician at the CSIR. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very much indeed for coming. All right, Angelo, how do you read the situation in the ANC, the sequence of events, and I'll oversimplify this. Last night, sitting in the chair where you are now, Fikile Mbalula said that President Ramaphosa had been very important to the campaign. Ace Makashile was asked today how important was the president to the campaign. He said, we're not a party of individuals. Then Fikile Mbalula seemed to say, if I understand the quote correctly, I think he used this phrase, and I'd need to check, he said that Makashile should not be allergic to Ramaphosa. And then, on our air, half an hour ago, here on SABC News, Ace Makashile himself saying there are no differences between them. How do you see it?
In a previous lifetime, I used to be the parasite who looked at novels. Now I seem to be the parasite who looks at what politicians have to say and have to critique it. My sense is that there is something there. We've known that there's something there since December of 2017. That the internal dynamic in the top six and the internal dynamic in the NEC is the internal dynamic of the African National Congress. And while the more they talk about unity, the more there is also the psychiatric cabaret where senior officials are saying things that don't quite sing from the same hymn book. And then afterwards come together and somehow have to make what were discordant voices now turn into melody. And this is not new for the ANC. It has happened over the last couple of years, on and off, and here we only have yet another instance of this.
Is it worse this time around? And I say this because in the elections beforehand, the election campaigns beforehand, it seems that hymn has been easier to compose. This time around, it seems as if there have been some more difficulties, or perhaps more significant difficulties, and perhaps to an extent situated around the relationship between the Secretary General and the leader, which in the past has really been crucial to a well-functioning ANC.
So again here, those contradictions are going to work themselves out. We've already heard from Mr. Makashile that the ANC president is the ANC president and he has certain powers as that. However, on other occasions we will hear that ministers of government served at the president's pleasure and therefore could be disserved or at his displeasure be dismissed. So that relationship between the party and its structure of leadership and the role of the executive head of government and head of state and his ability to do what he wants to do, those are often used at quite strategic occasions to say very different kinds of things. And here I think South Africans have to listen out for when which excuse is being deployed. Right now, unity is absolutely necessary, and that is what the party will speak. At some other point, there will be collective responsibility taken. At another point, there will be talk about how the leader of government has the right to appoint who he likes, and yet at the same time, there will be the leader of government will do what the party leadership insists is the party mandate that has to be done.
All right, a lot more to come there. Professor Pravesh Debba from the CSIR, you've been looking at your models. Firstly, are you a happy man or are you a worried mathematician? You've been making predictions. We're getting closer and closer to the sort of moment of absolute truth. I think some of the provinces have declared. You look pretty cheerful, I must say.
Yes, we are very happy with the model. So for the 9th time in a row, we have predicted correctly, with a certain margin of error. On the South African elections, but we've also done this on US election as well. So when we came at 3 yesterday morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, we were able to make a prediction, and we are off by 0.3% for the ANC and for DA. And for the EFF, we were off by 1.4%. So our models did really well.
Is there a reason why you were off more for the EFF than for the other parties? Is it because the size of the party matters in terms of how many numbers you have to play with?
I think there is certain changes that is happening in the EFF that is very difficult to actually predict that is going to happen. And in our case, there were a lot more of the provinces, the numbers for the EFF has increased. So this did have an effect on the model.
All right. Let's just talk. I know one of the interesting sort of areas that we have of this election is that we have three big metros that are being run by coalition governments. I use the phrase coalition governments. In two of them, in Joburg and Tshwane, I really mean sort of informal coalition agreements. But perhaps the most fascinating is the coalition in Nelson Mandela Bay. The mayor is from the United Democratic Movement, Mongameli Bubani, and it is the UDM that has in fact suffered in this election quite dramatically. But in that coalition, you have members largely from the ANC and I think two councillors from the EFF. What are you seeing in Nelson Mandela Bay, in that metro? How are people voting there?
In Nelson Mandela Bay, we have for ANC, we are predicting, we're still predicting that it will end up at 46.2%, so it's under 50%. And for the DA, we are looking at 39.5%. For the EFF, it has increased quite a bit to 7.71%. So for EFF, the increase from the last election is 3.56%.
All right, so we're seeing a situation where if this was a local government election, in fact, this coalition would be the people in power.
Yes.
It would be this. So in a way, the situation is actually reflective, to an extent, perhaps not in the choice of mayor, but it is reflective of the actual will of the people.
Yes, no, absolutely. But I think one must also realize that people vote very differently from your national elections and your municipal elections. And you can even see that in the results as well. If you look at the the way the people have voted nationally in 2019, it is 2% higher for the ANC than what they voted municipal-wise, or provincial-wise, sorry.
Let's look at the other coalition areas, or the informal coalition areas, really, between the EFF and the Democratic Alliance in Joburg and Tshwane. Let's look at Joburg first. You have a Mayor, Herman Mashaba, who is in his own way, a national figure, partly because of some of the comments that he's made. What do the figures there show?
For the ANC, we're also expecting that it would be under 50%. So we are predicting at 49.3%. And for the DA, we are predicting at 29.4%, the EFF 14.7%, and then you have the others.
Angelo, in a way, this is in line with the trends that we've seen, that the DA is actually losing support. I'd have to go back and check, but I think from 2016, they have actually lost support from when that election in Joburg was held.
So again, to go back to just what was said by the professor from the CSR, people do vote very differently in local government and national elections. And so even on that provincial ballot, people may have felt that their local governance, they're going to trust a councillor who is either at ward or PR level, but when it comes to governing the province, they prefer a party because of its particular projection of policy and the way in which it governs that. And so we have to be very careful to draw a direct line between 2016 and 2019. It's probably far more useful to draw it between 2014 and 2019. And there, of course, those big parties are losing out, and the EFF is gaining ground. And also, so is the Freedom Front Plus, because it's precisely the disaffection with the two dominant parties that means that good, well-performing small parties are gaining some of those votes.
We've just got 3 minutes before we go back to Joburg and my colleague Siphiso Mokwetla for a few moments. Let's look at Tshwane very quickly. And of course, there have been situations there where the DA mayor and very nearly lost his job in a vote of no confidence that was stopped at the last minute. Again, an informal coalition arrangement between the ANC and the EFF. What does it look like?
Compared to 2014, both the ANC and DA are down, and the EFF is up. So we are looking at 46.6% for the ANC, 29.7% for the DA, and 14.7% for EFF.
Okay, so what we're seeing then is all of these dynamics playing out. I imagine there are plenty of other municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal run by coalitions, often involving the NFP, where we could see all sorts of situations developing. All right, Angelo, we've got literally 30 seconds left. In a strange way, we're seeing some changes, and just to go back to the point you're making about how it is the big parties that are suffering. I mean, this talks about disaffection in a way with the middle.
Yes, and it's also the disaffection with the non-delivery of that middle, and so it's what Tariq Ali calls the dangerous centrist. And so people are beginning to graft toward, or drift off towards parties that do seem to indicate something of an alternative to what is seen as mainstream centrist ideas.
Angelo Fick and Professor Pravesh Debba from the CSIR, thank you very much indeed. All right, stay with us here on the SABC News Channel. A lot more information to come through. We will also try and get one of the people involved in that legal challenge, that legal letter that's been sent to the Electoral Commission. All of that to come in the next half hour. Stay with us.